In the wake of the attacks, President Bush immediately signed a major disaster declaration, activating the FRP, the Federal Response Plan.
I want the entire country to know that of all of the employees at FEMA, everyone is absolutely working their hardest to do everything they can to bring all the federal resources to bear on this desperate situation.
The Homeland Security rules and Presidential Decision Directive 62 mandates that the Environmental Protection Agency be the lead agency for the activities where there's a terrorist attack as it relates to environmental protection.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Christy Todd Whitman, the administrator of EPA, went to New York City and addressed the people there.
We've had concern. We're going to continue to monitor, but right now, as I will tell you, everything we're getting back from the sampling that we're doing is below background levels. There is not a reason for the general public to be concerned. It's not going to be a particular hazard unless you have breathing difficulties, a heart condition, and you shouldn't be out here walking around and trying to get exercise. So that's not appropriate, obviously.
Anybody with half a brain would probably look at that cloud and say, this can't be good for you. But, unfortunately, when you're called to war, you don't say, well, I'm not going in there, you just go.
But what exactly was in that burning pile where the World Trade Center once stood? According to final studies later published by the EPA and other government agencies, a devastating toxic soup containing more than 2,500 contaminants. Asbestos fibers, once inhaled, cannot be expelled by the lungs and cause various cancers. Benzene, another carcinogen, suppresses the immune system and can cause leukemia. Mercury is toxic to the nervous system, and especially the kidneys. Lead and cadmium are toxic to the respiratory tract and can also cause irreparable kidney damage. Polycystic aromatic hydrocarbons are the chemicals in cigarettes that cause lung, laryngeal, and mouth and throat cancer. PCBs commonly cause severe skin rashes and can also cause liver damage. Tiny particulates in the dust itself lodge in the heart, causing ischemic heart disease, often fatal.
You see 210-story buildings collapse and nothing's more than small little pieces. Where did the asbestos go? Where did all the concrete dust go? Where did all the fiberglass go? Where did all this go? And anybody could see that it went into the air.
We had seen people being dragged off that pile, eyes streaming, gasping and coughing and choking for breath. We knew very well that people were being exposed to irritant materials as well as cancer-causing agents, really from the start, and probably had health consequences that are unlikely to have been faced in other disasters.
The EPA was quick to reassure everyone that the air was safe.
Like right now, we're not getting any elevated levels that indicate concern.
But given the chaos of those first days, how much could the EPA have really known about the contents of that chemical soup?
In the early days, it was difficult for EPA to have access. The folks who wanted to go in and set up the monitors didn't have access. There were problems with electricity. There were problems because the equipment was not available, nor were the analysts available to do the work in the first few days following the collapse of the World Trade Center.
So far, we have done over 24 air samples. We're doing air monitoring, constant air monitoring. We've taken dust samples.
In fact, by September 13th, the EPA had taken only 10 ambient air samples in Lower Manhattan, according to the EPA's own data published later.
Well, if there's any good news out of all this, it's that everything we've tested for, which includes asbestos, lead, and VOCs, have been below any level of concern for the general public health.
Certain toxins had not been tested. There were other contaminants of potential concern, and those included PCBs, PAHs, dioxin, and I believe some other metals.
You cannot find what you don't look for. This is true. And the agency could have done a much better job of looking.
It's not a health concern. Now, it's not nice. I'm not saying this smells nice. I'm not saying this is nice. But from a real health problem, we don't have to worry.
But according to a report later issued by its Inspector General, the EPA's reassuring public statements that week were not based on science. They were based on White House policy.
The White House, the Council on Environmental Quality, EPA, and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration worked together on the press releases. The White House had the final word, so EPA did not feel that it had ownership of those press releases.
The White House Council on Environmental Quality is headed by James Connaughton, who is not a scientist. He had been appointed to his post by President Bush only months before 9/11. His previous experience? Representing large corporations in disputes about cleaning toxic waste sites, working against the EPA.
White House Council on Environmental Quality is not on this. They're not even a part. They shouldn't have been involved at all.
We were told that CEQ had a desire to protect the national security and to get Wall Street open, and that was the reason that the press releases were changed.
The original title of the EPA's September 13th press release was subtitled, Testing Terrorized Sites for Environmental Hazards. The subtitle after the CEQ's revisions, Reassures Public About Environmental Hazards. The original draft of the EPA's September 16th press release noted several debris samples that showed levels of asbestos ranging from 2.1 to 3.3%, explaining that anything above 1% is defined as asbestos-containing material.
At that point, the area should have been evacuated because we had a presumed assumption of hazard. And then testing should have been done and people allowed back in.
Instead, when the statement was released, the CEQ had changed the wording. The debris samples were now described as containing small percentages of asbestos, slightly above the 1% trigger for defining asbestos material.
Our work showed that more than 25% of the samples exceeded the 1% benchmark for asbestos. That's not a health-based benchmark. In fact, an EPA expert testified after 9/11 that 0.5% can be just as dangerous as 20%. This one is wonderful. This was deleted from the draft. The concern raised by these samples would be for the workers at the cleanup site and for those workers who might be returning to their offices on Monday, September 17th. So you take out the part where people are told that they need to be concerned.
When the president visited Ground Zero on that first weekend, his message was clear. This was not a time for caution, but for action.
I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
The President of the United States made a PR visit to Ground Zero and didn't wear his respirator, giving the false impression to the people that it was safe not to wear a respirator. The President of the United States himself gave that false impression.
There appeared to be a great motive to return everything back to normal as quickly as possible, particularly in the financial district.
I'm looking forward to getting back to work.
Do you know the condition of your office?
I believe we're fine. I've been told we're fine. I live down here. I haven't been back home, but I know that it'll be fine.
We're told that they have checked the air quality and that it's all right, but I'm always dubious about something like that. I'm hoping it's all right. I'm not happy being in the area.
Ladies and gentlemen, our heroes will now open the marketplace. The green button.
On September 18th, EPA Administrator Christine Whitman released a sweeping statement clearly designed to get America back to work, saying, "Given the scope of the tragedy from last week, I am glad to reassure the people of New York and Washington, D.C. that their air is safe to breathe."
I was horrified. We knew that she couldn't have been addressing all the irritants that were present in the air, and we knew that very little monitoring had been done at that time. And I strongly suspected that it had economic and political motivations rather than it being based on a real concern for public health.
The air quality is safe and acceptable. And I know there are people that are concerned about it and people that are worried about it, but that's just the reality.
If the mayor says it's okay, then I believe him. It's okay.
With Wall Street open for business, others who worked in the area were expected to return to their jobs.
People were brought back into contaminated areas when they should not have been. They were put at tremendous risk.
And when we returned to the offices, there was dust all over the insides. There were 3 to 5 inches of dust on the window sills, and the windows were old anyway, so the dust kept seeping in through the windows. We were stuck with that for 6 months.
And at the beginning of the disaster, a number of my colleagues were walking around at work, like me, wearing a HEPA respirator on their face. But you can imagine trying to talk on the telephone and practice law when you're wearing one of these. I sound like Darth Vader, frankly, when I'm wearing one of these.
Within months, workers in the area began to report respiratory illnesses.
And they were being transferred out or relocated because they were coming down with asthma. Sometime in January, I started with the nosebleeds. And then I started to get this soreness in my chest.
At this point, I have become allergic to every known antibiotic. I have had so many episodes of bronchitis and pneumonia that I am now allergic to everything.
At Ground Zero, an army of workers and volunteers, over 5,000 people per day, began a cleanup process that would last for months. Below their feet, the fires continued to smolder until December of 2001.
We had a slow-motion incinerator that for 3 months burned at ground level, creating computer parts and so on into a fine aerosol the people above it were breathing.
It was laughable to police officers and firefighters on that pile to say the air was safe to breathe. There was particles in the air for months after.
I personally feel that once the situation had come where there were no more people to be rescued, they should have put a barbed wire fence around the entire site and then put the fires out. Why the heck was there this enormous rush to clean the site up? For heaven's sakes, make the site safe and then clean it up.